If you've ever made a mistake so awkward, so soul-freezing, you wish the ground would swallow you whole, then you're going to feel every beat of Maya's heart as she walked into that room. And if you stay till the end, you'll see how one nervous step led her straight into the eyes, and the heart, of a man she never thought would notice her billionaire boss. Maya clutched the worn strap of her mother's old leather bag as she stepped out of the elevator, floor 37, heart racing like she'd just run a marathon. It was her first day interning at Hawthorne Innovations, the sleek skyscraper tech firm known across the country not only for their gadgets but also for the elusive, powerful CEO who rarely made public appearances, Alexander Hawthorne. She had barely slept the night before. Her shoes were slightly too tight, her blouse a size too big, and her resume still had a coffee stain on the bottom corner. Maya didn't come from Ivy League prestige. She came from night shifts and scholarships, raised by a single mother who believed in her even when Maya didn't. She took a deep breath and glanced down at the room number scribbled on her welcome letter, 3742. She pushed the glass door open, every muscle in her body coiled tight from anxiety, and walked in. The room fell silent. 12 sharply dressed executives, a glossy oak table, and a man at the head whose presence silenced the air itself. Maya froze. The man looked up, mid-sentence. His eyes, steel gray, narrowed ever so slightly. "Can we help you?" His voice was smooth, low, like it didn't need to be loud to command. Maya's throat went dry. I'm sorry, I was told to come to room 3742 for onboarding. "This is the quarterly strategic merger meeting," someone else said with a subtle chuckle, trying to be polite but amused nonetheless. The man's gaze didn't waver. He nodded to his assistant. "Let her stay." Maya blinked. "I beg your pardon, sir," the assistant asked. "I said let her stay," he repeated, now looking straight at Maya. She just made a braver entrance than half this room. Laughter scattered around nervously, unsure whether he was joking. He wasn't. Maya, stunned, shuffled to an empty chair at the corner of the table, cheeks burning with embarrassment. She opened her notebook as if taking notes would make her invisible. She didn't notice the way Alexander Hawthorne glanced at her more than once. For the next 45 minutes, she tried to make herself as small as possible. But something strange happened. Each time someone made a point, she instinctively jotted ideas down. She didn't even realize she was nodding, reacting. When the CTO presented a new proposal, Maya's brow furrowed. She didn't mean to speak. But she did. "Sorry," she said suddenly, "but wouldn't that put the servers at risk of a multi-point vulnerability if the proxy fails?" The room stopped again. Alexander turned to her. "Explain." Maya's hands trembled, but her voice found strength. She explained, briefly and clearly, and to her surprise, heads began nodding. Even the CTO seemed impressed. Alexander leaned back, watching her with renewed interest. "What's your name?" "Maya." "Maya Elman, sir." He smiled faintly. "Noted." She left the room 20 minutes later, after another executive escorted her to the correct onboarding orientation room, still dazed, heart galloping, wondering if she'd just ruined her whole life or somehow saved it. Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the steel glass towers of downtown, Alexander Hawthorne stood by his office window, swirling a glass of water, thinking of the intern with wide eyes and a quiet storm of intelligence. "Maya Elman," he said aloud, as if testing how her name felt in the air. She didn't know it yet, but a quiet shift had started in the life of a man used to control and predictability. He was a man who hadn't trusted anyone in years. And suddenly, he couldn't stop thinking about the girl who walked into the wrong room, like she was meant to be there all along. Backhand index pointing right. If this story is tugging your heart already, just wait until chapter 2. Don't forget to like this video and hit subscribe, because what happens next will melt your heart in ways you never expected. If you thought Maya's story ended with a wrong door and a surprising moment, you're wrong. That moment was just the beginning. Because sometimes, the smallest mistakes lead us exactly where we were meant to be, and for Maya and Alexander, fate had barely begun to turn its pages. Over the next few weeks, Maya tried to fade into the background of her internship. She worked diligently, always staying late, always eager to prove herself. She thought of her mother back home, working double shifts at the diner, believing in her. Maya had no idea that the men she embarrassed herself in front of, Alexander Hawthorne, had started noticing everything she did. Alexander, on the other hand, was a man of routine. For years, his life had been nothing but meetings, strategy, numbers, and solitude. Love? He didn't believe in it. Not since his father's betrayal left him alone to build the empire from scratch. He didn't have time for emotional distractions. But Maya, she was different. She was smart, honest, and completely unaware of her effect on him. And that intrigued him. One Thursday evening, Maya was the last person left on her floor, sorting out inventory details in the conference room. She didn't notice the footsteps approaching until a familiar voice said, "You always stay this late." She turned sharply, startled. It was him. Alexander Hawthorne. She quickly stood up. "I'm sorry, yes, I just wanted to finish this." "You're not in trouble," he said, smiling faintly. "I was just impressed." Again. Maya looked down shyly, not knowing what to say. Alexander stepped closer and picked up the document she had been reviewing. "You redesigned this format?" "Yes. I thought it might be easier for the teams if..." "It's 10 times better than the one we use now," he said, raising an eyebrow. "Why didn't you send this to anyone?" "I'm just an intern," she said, softly. "Didn't think it was my place." He looked at her a long moment. "Maybe you don't see your value yet. But I do." That night, he invited her to sit down and explain her thought process. And for the first time, they spoke not as CEO and intern, but as two people sharing ideas, experiences, quiet smiles. He told her stories of his early failures. She listened, wide-eyed, her admiration growing. Over the next several weeks, their paths kept crossing. And each time, it felt less like coincidence and more like something neither of them wanted to avoid. One rainy afternoon, Maya ran into the building soaked after her umbrella broke. She didn't expect to find Alexander in the lobby waiting for a client. He noticed her shivering, her blouse clinging to her arms. Without a word, he took off his tailored suit jacket and draped it around her shoulders. "Sir," she whispered, overwhelmed. "Just Alexander," he said gently. That moment sparked whispers in the office, speculation, rumors. But Maya ignored them. She thought she was imagining things until one day, she was called to his private office. She walked in nervously, fearing she had crossed some boundary. But he didn't look angry. He looked vulnerable. "I need to ask you something," he said. "And I want you to answer honestly." She nodded slowly. "Do you feel this too? Or am I just chasing something that's not real?" Maya's heart stopped. He walked closer. "Since the day you walked into that room, you disrupted everything I thought I knew about myself. You challenge me, humble me, and remind me what it's like to feel again." I'm no one," she whispered. "I'm just an intern." "You're not just anything," he said firmly. "You're the only one I've felt this way about in years." Tears welled up in her eyes. "But why me?" He cupped her face gently. "Because you're the only person who's ever walked into my world without fear, and left me hoping you'd never leave." Their lips met in a tender, hesitant kiss that spoke louder than any confession. From that day forward, everything changed. Maya completed her internship with honors, but she was also offered a full-time position. Not because she was loved by the CEO, but because she had earned it. And even when the world tried to question their bond, Alexander stood by her side. At a company gala 6 months later, he held her hand in front of thousands and introduced her as not just the head of innovation projects, but the woman who had opened his heart. The nervous intern who had once walked into the wrong room had unknowingly walked into the right story, a love story that would change both their lives forever. Sparkling Heart, if this story moved you, please give it a like, share it with someone who believes in love against all odds, and subscribe for more emotional stories that warm the heart. Your support means the world. Sparkling Heart, they said it wouldn't last. That the CEO of Hawthorne Innovations couldn't possibly fall for someone like Maya Ellman, a nervous intern with second-hand shoes and a heart too soft for corporate walls. The whispers only grew louder once their relationship went public. But what no one understood was that Alexander wasn't in love with her idle.t, he was in love with her soul. 3 months had passed since the gala where Alexander introduced her as the head of innovation projects, and his partner. But now came the real test, the world watching, the board whispering, the headlines questioning. Maya felt it all, the pressure, the imposter syndrome, the judgment. One morning, she sat by the edge of their penthouse balcony, sipping coffee, staring at the sunrise painting the skyline in golds and pinks. Alexander stepped out in his robe, quietly placing a warm croissant on her plate. "You didn't sleep much," he said softly. Maya nodded. "Just thinking. About whether I belong here." He kneeled in front of her, his voice warm but firm. "You didn't end up here by accident, Maya. You walked through the wrong door because the right door had been locked for too long. You opened something in me no one else ever reached." She smiled faintly, still unsure. That week, she launched her first company-wide initiative, an employee-led mentorship program to help entry-level workers, especially women from underprivileged backgrounds, grow into leadership roles. It was bold. It was different. And it was met with both praise and resistance. Too empathetic, one board member scoffed. "We're not a charity." But Alexander stood beside her at the next board meeting and said, "She's changing lives. And if that's a problem, I suggest you re-examine what this company stands for." His proposal was approved. Maya didn't say anything, but that night she cried in Alexander's arms, not out of weakness, but gratitude. Then came a letter. Handwritten. From her mother. "My dearest Maya. I watched your interview. I saw the way he looked at you. And I remembered the little girl who used to talk to stars and believe she could change the world. You already have. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Not because of where you are, but because you never let go of who you are. Love always. Mom." Maya pressed the letter to her heart and promised herself she wouldn't lose the girl her mother had raised. Even as she stood beside a billionaire, even as the spotlight followed her every move, she would remain grounded in humility. Weeks turned to months. Their love grew quietly, deeply, protected not by secrecy but by sincerity. One evening, Alexander whisked her away to the Hawthorne private estate in the hills. It was the same place where he had built his first prototype at age 22, sleeping on the office couch, eating ramen for months. He led her to a garden lined with fairy lights, a table set for two, and a soft breeze carrying the scent of jasmine. "I never believed I'd love again," he said, pulling a tiny box from his pocket. "Until you." Maya's breath caught. Alexander opened the box to reveal a ring, simple, elegant, exactly her style. He knelt down. "You walked into the wrong room and gave me the right reason to hope again. Will you marry me, Maya?" Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, "Yes." In that moment, it didn't matter that she had been an intern or he a billionaire. It didn't matter how the world saw them. What mattered was how they saw each other, raw, imperfect, real. Their story reminded everyone watching that love doesn't need to be logical, perfect, or expected. Sometimes, it just needs a chance, a nervous step, a kind word, a little courage. And as Maya and Alexander danced under the stars that night, they knew they hadn't just found love. They had built it. Together. Red Heart. If this chapter made you believe in unexpected love, please like this video and subscribe for more heart-touching stories. Your support helps us keep sharing these beautiful journeys with you. Stay kind, stay hopeful. Red Heart. Every fairy tale has its storm. For Maya and Alexander, it came not in thunderclaps or betrayals, but in the slow, quiet weight of expectations. Because when you're the wife of a billionaire CEO, the world doesn't wait long before asking, "What now?" Their engagement had made headlines. Their wedding, a quiet affair in the English countryside, had been the only thing kept private. And for a while, life was sweet. Mornings with coffee in bed, spontaneous kisses in the hallway, laughter between meetings. But soon, Alexander was swept back into high-stakes negotiations, global expansion talks, and board pressures. And Maya, now leading her mentorship program and a growing social impact division, felt the ache of distance creeping in. He would come home late, distracted. She would pretend not to notice. But at night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if the world he lived in had room for her heart. One night, it broke. Alexander walked into their penthouse well past midnight. Maya was waiting, not asleep, this time, not quiet. "You didn't even text," she said, voice calm but tired. "I got pulled into a last-minute call with Tokyo. Every night is Tokyo or Dubai or Berlin, she interrupted. And every time I tell myself you'll come home to me again. But tonight, I realized, maybe you already left. His shoulders fell. That's not fair. It's not about fairness, she said, tears gathering. It's about me not recognizing the men I married. He stepped forward, pain flashing in his eyes. Maya, this company, it was my entire life before you. And now I'm trying to balance both. I'm trying to keep everything from falling apart. She looked at him, eyes glistening. But I never asked you to carry it all alone. I just asked for us. Silence stretched between them like a fault line. Alexander ran a hand through his hair. You're right. I've been afraid. Of what? Of needing someone too much. Of depending on you the way I do. Because I've spent years thinking needing someone made me weak. And now. He walked over, sat beside her, his voice barely a whisper. Now I know not needing you would be the real weakness. He reached for her hand. I don't want a perfect marriage, Maya said, her voice cracking. I want a real one. One where we mess up, where we fight, but where we never stop choosing each other. He kissed her hand softly. Then let's start again. Tonight. They made a promise that night, not for perfection but for presence. And they kept it. Alexander cleared his calendar every Friday evening for no-work date nights. Maya, in turn, stepped back from trying to be everything to everyone and focused on what mattered most, what made her soul feel alive. They took trips. They read books together. They danced in the kitchen barefoot. And slowly, the pressure lifted. Then came news they weren't expecting. Maya sat in the clinic, hands trembling around a small ultrasound print. When she told Alexander, his eyes filled with tears. The men who once guarded his heart like a fortress now wept openly. They were going to be parents. The months that followed brought morning sickness, nursery planning, and long talks under starry skies. Alexander talked to her belly every night. He promised their child he would love Maya with the kind of strength that buoy. And on a golden spring morning, their daughter, Evelyn Grace, came into the world. Tiny. Strong. Beautiful. In the hospital room, Alexander held Evelyn against his chest, whispering, "You know your mom saved me, right?" She walked into the wrong room and found my heart waiting there. Maya, resting nearby, smiled with tears. "No, you found me." Their love wasn't flashy or flawless. It was rooted in trust, grown in storms, and blooming again in the form of a tiny heartbeat between them. Cherry blossom if you believe in second chances and love that's built, not just felt, then please like this video and subscribe. Every love story is a journey, and yours could be next. Share this with someone who needs a little hope today. Cherry blossom years had passed since Maya first stepped into the wrong room, a frightened intern with shaky hands and big dreams. Now, she stood confidently behind the podium at the Global Women's Leadership Summit, her daughter Evelyn asleep in the front row beside her proud husband, Alexander Hawthorne. The crowd waited. Maya adjusted the mic, smiled gently, and began. I was never supposed to be here. I didn't graduate from an Ivy League school. I didn't have wealth, connections, or a famous name. I was the daughter of a waitress. The girl who rode the bus across town every morning with her laptop in a tote bag. But one day, I walked into the wrong room, and met the men who would challenge everything I believed about myself. Not just as a professional, but as a woman. As a human being. As someone worthy of love. The room fell silent. Maya continued, her voice steady. I didn't become a leader because of him. I became one because he saw in me what I had forgotten to see in myself. And because I finally believed that I didn't have to shrink to be loved. She ended to thunderous applause. But more than that, she ended with peace in her heart. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Maya, Alexander, and little Evelyn walked through the same garden where he'd once proposed. Fireflies danced around them like tiny stars, and Evelyn giggled in her father's arms. You were amazing today, Alexander whispered. I wasn't nervous this time, Maya smiled. I guess I've come a long way from that nervous intern. He looked at her, pride in every line of his face. You're more than I ever dreamed. They sat by the fountain while Evelyn played nearby. Maya leaned her head on Alexander's shoulder. "I used to think my biggest mistake was walking into the wrong room," she murmured. "And now? Now I know it was fate's way of guiding me to you. To this." Alexander turned and kissed her forehead. "Then I owe fate everything." They watched their daughter chase butterflies, their hands intertwined. The world they had built together wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Made of quiet nights and loud laughter, of hard lessons and deeper love. Maya knew that some people would always see her as the intern who married a billionaire. But she didn't mind. Because she also knew the truth. She was the woman who turned her pain into purpose, who earned every inch of her life with kindness, courage, and grace. The woman who didn't just walk into a room. She changed it. And the men she met that day. He would spend the rest of his life making sure she never forgot how extraordinary she truly was. Sparkling heart, if Maya and Alexander's story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring and emotional stories. Your support helps keep these stories alive. And remember, sometimes the wrong years had passed since Maya first stepped into